Good morning and welcome to Ceramic Storytime with Sue. I'm Sue McLeod and I'm going to be reading to you today one of my blog posts called How the Water in Your Glaze is Affecting Your Results. So I will just give you a minute to join me here, and then I'm going to make sure I'm live and that I have no technical difficulties. My last story time, I shared my screen and it was just black the whole time rather than you being able to see the blog post that I'm reading. So I didn't realize that till the end. So if you notice anything weird going on, please type in the comments. And I would love to hear if you're watching me live, just say hello and where you're watching from. I can see that I'm live, so I might get started. What I've been doing recently is just giving a little shout out to the makers of my morning coffee cups. So this morning, Ceramic Storytime is brought to you today by this mug made by Jim Etzkorn. He's a Canadian potter. I think he's from Alberta. I bought this at the Fired Up show in Machosen quite a few years ago. It's soda fired mug here. So that's a Jim Etzkorn mug. So I doubt he's watching, but if you know him, let him know. I'm quite enjoying his mug, my morning coffee. Okay, so, hi from Kamloops. Hi, Lily. Yay, thanks for saying hi. All right, so I'm going to get started. Oh, hi, Jill from Williams Lake. Awesome. We got BC Potters in the house this morning. So that's great. I also live in BC, British Columbia. I live in Soup, which is just west of Victoria on Vancouver Island. So in case you didn't know where I'm from. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Again, I'm reading my blog post, How the Water in Your Glaze is Affecting Your Results. So if you want to follow along, you can go to bit.ly/glazewater. So that's bit.ly/glazewater. And you can follow along. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully it's going to work this time. Let me just remove the text there. So I'm just checking to see whether you guys can see my screen here before I get started. I just want to make sure everything's running smoothly. Last week I had some video issues and I had some sound issues, but I did 4 story times, which was, or it wasn't last weekend, the weekend before. I did 4, so the chances of something screwing up were high. Hi, Gemma. Gemma has come to quite a few of these, so thank you for joining me. Okay, I see my screen on the video, so I'm going to get started. So how the water in your glaze is affecting your results. And you can also download a PDF of this article if you go to bit.ly/glazewater. And then if you click this link here, you can enter your email address and then it will send you a PDF of this article that you can save to your files. So, does any of this sound familiar to you? You unload a piece from the kiln and the glaze turned out perfectly. So you glaze more pieces with the same glaze combination, fire them, and they turn out completely different. Or you mix a small test batch of glaze and love how it looks on the test tile. So then you mix a larger bucket of the same glaze and it turns out completely different. Or let me know if any of these sound familiar. You've got your glazing process down to a science, but your results are still unpredictable. Or you have one of those glazes that's one color when it's thick and a different color when it's thin, but you can't seem to control which result you get. Or you have a glaze that runs when it's too thick and you hold your breath every firing, hoping you get the application right this time. This was my main issue. Or you always do a 3-second dip or any number of seconds. So you count your dip length. You always do the same number of seconds for your glaze dips, but your results aren't always the same. Or your glaze results are so inconsistent that you think you'll never be good at this. That was also me a while back. Or you feel like you have no control over your glaze application and you're tired of ruining your pots by glazing them. Also my experience. Or maybe all of the above. So the good news, all of these issues can be improved by controlling the thickness of your glaze application. Glaze application thickness has a huge impact on what the glaze will look like once it's fired. Gemma says yes to all. Yes, I hear you, Gemma. So for example, some glazes have a lot of depth when they're thick, but appear flat when thin. Some glazes change color when they're thick versus thin. Some glazes will run when they're too thick and run onto the kiln shelves. And then some clear glazes are cloudy when they're thick. Since application thickness determines how our glazes will look once they're fired, application thickness is what we need to control when we're glazing. When we have consistent application thickness, then we have consistent fired results. Consistent application thickness starts with consistent water content. So the first step to controlling glaze application thickness is by controlling the water content of our glazes. Water plays a big role in how glazes are applied to pottery. In any glaze bucket, you have solid particles suspended in water. The ratio of solid particles to water affects how thick your application will be. When you dip a piece of bisque into a bucket of glaze, the bisque sucks the water into its pores. This sucking action is called capillary suction. This is what draws the solid particles to the surface of the bisque and holds them there. The glaze appears to dry rather instantly, but the water is still there inside the pores of the bisque. The water then evaporates over time and the solid particles remain and become the glaze. The more water you have in a glaze, the less solid particles there are proportionately to stick to the bisque. Less solid particles means a thinner glaze application. More water equals less solid particles equals a thinner application. Less water equals more solid particles equals a thicker application. And each glaze will have a different ideal ratio of solid particles to water. You get to decide how you like each of your glazes best. One glaze might look better when thicker with less water, and another glaze might look better when thinner with more water. The key here is once you've got your glaze to the thickness that looks best to you, you can keep the ratio of solid particles to water the same every time you glaze. This is how you get consistent glaze results from firing to firing. If the water content isn't consistent, your glaze application thickness will also be inconsistent, and then your results will also be inconsistent. But if your water content is always the same, and then your application thickness will be consistent and your fired results will also be consistent. So here are some examples of how water content affects fired results. In each of the photos below, the glaze on the left has less water and the glaze on the right has more water. Water content is the only difference between each pair of test tiles. In every case, the tile on the left has a thicker application, more solid particles than the tile on the right. You may like the tile on the left better or the tile on the right. There's no right answer here. I just want you to see how water content affects the fired appearance of a glaze. Sometimes it's drastic, sometimes it's subtle. A darker clay body will often enhance the differences. So all of these test tiles are made from Plainsman M340 clay. And then if you are on this web page, you can click any of these, the names of the glaze, and that is a link that will take you to the recipe. So if you like any of these glazes and you want to mix them for yourself, then the recipes are all on glazy.org. So this first example, Sue's Woo Yellow. So this is a variation of a glaze called Woo Yellow that exists out there. And then I took that recipe and I adjusted it to make it more suitable for cone 6. So this is my variation of that glaze. So this is a glaze that's dark where it's very thin and on the edges, and it's lighter and you don't get the dark edges where it's thicker. So this is the thin tile on the right, and then the thicker glaze application on the left. So on the right, you can see these dark brown edges, which can look really nice and enhance the texture of your pottery. But I've also seen this glaze come out where it's so thin that the whole glaze is this dark brown color. So if you're expecting your glaze to be yellow and the whole thing comes out a dark rusty brown color, you might be a little disappointed. And then this one is more uniform in its color, in its yellow color, so it doesn't have these dark breaking edges. But this could also cover up texture. So you might like that yellow uniform color, but then if you have a texture on your pots, then you might not like how it covers up. So you might prefer the thinner application over the thicker. So you get to decide, but the key is if your water content is consistent, then you can consistently get the results that you like the best. So this glaze here is called Sue's Eggshell. Again, it's an existing recipe that I took and adapted. And so this is a glaze that is darker where it's thinner and on the edges, and lighter where it's thick. So this is the thicker version here on the left. And so you can see that it's quite creamy and glossy. And then when it's thinner, it goes a darker rusty orange color. And then it's a little less glossy where it's thin. So if you like the having the more orange color in your glaze, then you might want to make it on the thinner side. Or if you like this rich, glossy, creamy color, then you might want to keep it on the thick side. This one is called Raw Sienna. So this isn't one of my glazes. It's a studio glaze that we use at the studio where I work. So the thicker on the left, it's a subtle difference between these two, but it's a deeper brown and is a little more glossy where it's thicker versus where it's thinner. And as you probably know, like, these differences are enhanced once it's on a large pot. So test tiles are one thing, and then when you glaze a larger piece of pottery, then any sort of nuances become enhanced. And so this thicker version can look significantly different than the thinner version on a larger piece. And this is Anna's Green. So this one, the thicker version, is dripping. You can see these big drips on the side. It's a bit more blue and runnier, and then the thinner version is more green with less blue. So it's more like blue where it's pooling. And then this is our Sapphire Blue glaze that I've shared quite a lot because the difference is so drastic. I love this example. This glaze has a lot of rutile in it. Rutile is often what gives, so if we took the rutile out of this glaze, it would be a more uniform color. So the rutile is what gives this glaze its variation. So all this interesting effect. So it's sapphire blue. We've got this bright blue color where it's thick, but then when we thin it down, it just becomes this dark green color. And you can see on the left thicker tile here where it's breaking over the edge, you get that dark green color. So you can see where it's thinner, you're getting this dark green. But if you glaze your whole piece and you're expecting it to come out blue and it comes out dark green, then you might be a little disappointed. This is our blue, green, pink glaze. It's a deeper blue and it's runnier. You can see the drip always look for the little drip on the side. So this is a runny glaze when it's too thick, but it's also this like richer blue. And then where it's thinner, you get a much lighter, like a powder blue color. So depending what you like better, you might want to keep it on the thicker side, but then you have to deal with the running. So those are decisions you can make. And then this one is another one with titanium in it, like rutile. Rutile is iron and titanium. So this is a glaze that is a different color where it's thick versus where it's thin. So it's yellow where it's thin. So you can see it's where it breaks over the edges, it's yellow. And then it's like this dusty rose color where it's thick. And so on the thin tile, you just get a little bit of the rose where it's pooling, where it's thicker. So if you're looking for this rose color, you want to make sure your application is thick, because if it's too thin, you're just going to get yellow. Maybe you like the yellow, in which case you would want to keep your glaze on the thinner side. And then white. So the glaze looks exactly the same, but as you can see, it's quite runny when it's too thick. And so with this glaze, we would just want to keep it on the thinner side to prevent the running. So how do we control the water content of a glaze? If you always have consistent water content, meaning you always have the same proportion of solid particles to water, then you have the best chance for consistent application thickness. So how do we always have consistent water content in our glazes? And we do that by measuring specific gravity. So last week I did a live demonstration of how to measure specific gravity. So if you want, it's posted to Facebook and Instagram and on my website. So if you go to my website, you can just search for specific gravity and that should show up on there. So we control the proportion of solid particles to water by measuring specific gravity. Measuring specific gravity tells you the ratio of solid particles to water in your glaze bucket. It gives you a calculated number that you can come back to every time you glaze. All you need to measure specific gravity is a scale and a measuring container. I like using a graduated cylinder. I don't recommend using a hydrometer to measure specific gravity, and you can read all my reasons why in the blog post that I wrote about why I don't use a hydrometer to measure specific gravity. So if you're interested in that, you could go to bit.ly/no hydrometer, and you could read that post. If you want to learn how to measure specific gravity of your glazes, I have a free PDF guide called The Specifics of Consistent Glazes that you can download. So if you click on this link, or if you go to sumacloudceramics.com/SG guide, SG is for specific gravity, then you can download, and it has all the steps, like pictures of all the steps for measuring specific gravity. So you can download it and print it or keep it on your computer. And then there's also a link to how I measure and adjust specific gravity here on this webpage. Learning to measure specific gravity has been a complete game changer for me, not only for improving my own glaze results, but for all the glazes that I manage at the community studio where I work. We can now confidently teach beginners how to use our glazes because we measure specific gravity on a monthly basis to always keep them consistent. It's such a foundational glazing step that's often overlooked or seen as unnecessary. But if you've ever felt like you have no control over your glaze results and you think you have to leave it up to the kiln gods to determine whether your pieces will turn out or not, this is your chance to take your power back with science. Through the use of a little math and science, you can be your own kiln god and know that your glaze results will always be consistent. So that is the end of that article. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the comment section here. I'll just give a minute for the feed to catch up. There's a little bit of a delay. But I wanted to mention, so I do teach a full online course about this topic. So the steps for measuring specific gravity are quite simple, but then there's the whole like, oh, what should my specific gravity be? Sometimes your glazes will need to be flocculated or deflocculated. So sometimes when you add too much water, or when you add enough water, maybe so that your glaze stops running, then it's too thick, like that sapphire blue example. That's green where it's thin, blue where it's thick. If you don't want the running, you need to bring the water content up to thin out the application, but then your glaze application can be too thin, so then you can flocculate your glaze to increase the viscosity without adjusting the water content. So there's a lot more to this than just getting the ratio of solid particles to water where you want them, although that is a really good first step, and that's a good way to keep your glazes consistent. And I recommend when you're starting out to take your glazes, when you get good results come out of the kiln, then you go to your glaze bucket, you measure the specific gravity as it is right then, and you write that number down. And then you always go back to that number because you already know that you like the results when your glaze is at that specific gravity number. And so if you just make sure that you always keep your glaze at that specific gravity, then your glazes will be consistent. But if you want to have more control over your results, sometimes you're layering glazes, sometimes you have glazes that are super thick, and no matter how much water you add to them, they just seem to keep thickening up again. Those glazes often need to be deflocculated. So I have a whole system that I teach, right from making test tiles to keeping a glaze journal, kind of all the steps that I follow in my studio and the studio where I work, through specific gravity, all the science behind how specific gravity works, how flocculation and deflocculation work. And so I teach all of that in my online course, which is called Mastering Glaze Consistency. And I'm opening up registration on October the 24th. So if you're watching this before October 24th, 2020, you can go to SueMcLeodCeramics.com/mastering glaze consistency. And there is a waitlist sign up form. So if you want to get more information, and there's also a description kind of what you will learn in that course. So if you're interested, you want to take this further, if you want to like really understand how glazes work and how to control them and manipulate them and get them working the way that you want them to, then I would invite you to join me in that program. I only offer it twice a year. So registration will be open for a week. And then it closes down, and then I run the class, and it's all online, and you get lifetime access to it. So you can always like watch it when it's convenient for you. So I just thought I would mention that. If you're watching this in the future, you can still go to that link, SueMcLeodCeramics.com/mastering glaze consistency, and there will be a waitlist form that you can sign up for. And I'll probably offer it again next spring. So that is it for story time for today. So I want to thank everyone that's joined me live here. It's always nice to not see your faces, but see your comments and interact with you a little bit while I'm doing these story times. So with that, I hope you have a really good weekend, and I will see you next weekend. I won't be another announcement. So I'm going to be, whatchamacallit. So in honor of my course that I'm opening up registration for, I'm going to be teaching a free class, kind of to introduce my program. And it's called 7 Ways to Control Your Glaze Results. And so that's going to be happening next weekend. So if you're on my email list, you'll be getting an email about that on Tuesday. If you're not, then you can go to that link I was saying, sumaclaudceramics.com/mastering glaze consistency. Get on the wait list, and then you'll get the email about this free masterclass that I'm going to be offering next weekend. So I hope to see you there. Hi, Mary. Mary says, thank you so much. I always enjoy watching your live videos. Jill says, thank you for generously sharing your knowledge. You're all welcome, and I thank you for coming and joining me for story time. So I will let you go, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye.